My name is Evelyn, and I am 34 years old, and I have lived in the beautiful city of Springfield for most of my adult life. I work as a freelance architectural photographer, which means my schedule is never the same from one day to the next, and I am constantly relying on my car to get me to various locations across the state. I take great pride in my small but well-maintained house on a quiet suburban street where the trees are tall and the lawns are usually perfectly manicured. I spent years saving up for this house, and I put a lot of work into the flower beds and the paint job on the front porch because I believe that your home is your sanctuary. For a long time, it was exactly that. I had a wonderful neighbor named Harold who lived in the house next door for 20 years, but when he decided to move to a retirement community, a young man named Chad moved in. From the very first day Chad arrived, things began to change for the worse. Chad is about 25 years old and he drives a crusty silver sedan that looks like it has not been washed since the previous decade. At first, I tried to be a welcoming neighbor by bringing over a basket of muffins and introducing myself, but Chad barely looked up from his phone and just gave a grunt in response. I figured he was just overwhelmed with the move, so I did not take it personally. However, the real trouble started a week later when I walked out of my front door to head to a very important photo shoot at a newly restored historic library. I was shocked to see that Chad had parked his silver sedan directly across the bottom of my driveway. He was not just overlapping, by an inch or two, he was completely blocking me in so that there was no way for me to get my car out onto the street. I went over to his house and knocked on the door, and when he finally answered in his bathrobe, he looked annoyed that I was even there. I politely explained that I needed to leave for work and asked if he could move his car, and he just rolled his eyes and said he would get to it in a minute because he was in the middle of a video game. It took him 20 minutes to finally come outside and move the car, and by then I was already running late. I tried to tell myself it was a one-time mistake, but it became a regular occurrence. At least 3 times a week, I would find that silver sedan sitting there like a physical barrier between me and the rest of the world. I tried every nice way to handle it. I wrote polite notes on yellow sticky notes and left them on his windshield. I tried to catch him when he was taking out the trash to have a neighborly chat about the city ordinances regarding blocking driveways. Every single time, he gave me the same excuse, which was that he was just going to be there for a little bit. That little bit usually turned into 4 or 5 hours, and sometimes even overnight. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home because I never knew if I would actually be able to leave when I needed to. One Tuesday morning, I had a massive project due for a high-end real estate client, and I had to be on site by 7 in the morning to catch the perfect golden hour light. I woke up at 5 in the morning and got my gear ready and drank my coffee with a sense of excitement only to walk outside and see the silver sedan blocking me yet again. I pounded on Chad's door, but he did not answer. I rang the doorbell repeatedly, but the house remained silent. I ended up having to call a ride-share service, which cost me $40, and I had to leave my professional lighting equipment behind because I could not carry it all by myself. I was furious, and when I got home later that afternoon, the car was gone, and Chad was sitting on his porch scrolling through his phone. When I confronted him about the cost of the ride-share and the stress he caused, he just laughed and told me I should learn to relax. That was the moment I realized that being nice was never going to work with a person like Chad. He did not care about rules or respect or the well-being of others because he lived in a world where he was the only person who mattered. I decided to contact the local police department to see if they could do anything, but they told me that since it was a residential street, they would have to send an officer out to write a ticket, and that could take hours depending on how busy they were. I contacted the homeowners association, but they said they could only issue fines after a long process of warnings and hearings. It felt like the system was designed to protect people like Chad, while people like me just had to suffer. My frustration grew until it felt like a heavy weight in my chest every time I pulled into my neighborhood. I started to look for other solutions because the situation was becoming unbearable. I even looked into moving, but I loved my house too much to let a rude neighbor drive me away. I began to document every single time he blocked me, taking photos with timestamps and keeping a detailed log in a notebook. I had dozens of entries within just a few weeks. The breaking point came on a Friday evening when I was planning to go out to a nice dinner with some old friends I had not seen in years. I had spent an hour getting ready, and I was wearing my favorite blue dress and felt wonderful. I walked out to my car, and there it was again. The crusty silver sedan was parked so close to my garage door that I could not even open it properly. I lost my temper and yelled at the top of my lungs, but Chad's house was dark and he did not come out. I ended up missing the dinner entirely because by the time I could have found another way there, it would have been over. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried because I felt so powerless and small. I realized that Chad was a bully, and the only way to stop a bully is to show them that their actions have consequences that they cannot ignore. I spent the rest of that night researching the local towing laws in Springfield, and I found a company called Miller's Heavy Duty Towing and Recovery that operated 24 hours a day and specialized in private property impounds. I saved their number in my phone and waited for the right moment to strike. A week passed, and Chad was actually surprisingly careful for a few days, but I knew it would not last because people like him always fall back into their old habits. Then came last Thursday. The weather was warm and the sun was starting to set over the Springfield skyline. I was coming home from a long day of shooting at a park, and as I turned onto my street, my heart sank, but then immediately began to race with a mix of anger and anticipation. There it was. The silver sedan was not just blocking my driveway, it was parked diagonally across it, as if Chad had just hopped out of the car in a huge hurry and did not care where it landed. I pulled my own car up to the curb a few houses down and walked toward my home. As I passed Chad's house, I looked through his large front window, which had the curtains wide open. I saw Chad standing in his living room looking into a mirror. He was wearing a fancy button-down shirt and splashing a ridiculous amount of cologne on his neck. He was checking his hair and smiling at himself with a look of extreme confidence. It was obvious that he was getting ready for a big date. I saw a bottle of wine on his table and 2 glasses. I realized that this was the perfect opportunity I had been waiting for. Chad thought he was going to have a great night, but he had forgotten that he was still infringing on my rights as a homeowner. I went inside my house and grabbed my phone and my logbook. I stepped onto my back porch so he would not see me through the front window, and I called Miller's Heavy Duty Towing and Recovery. The dispatcher was a woman with a gravelly voice who sounded like she had heard it all before. I told her that a vehicle was completely blocking my primary point of ingress and egress, and that I had documented proof that this was a recurring issue. She asked for the make and model of the car and the license plate number, which I provided instantly because I had memorized it weeks ago. She told me a driver would be there within 30 minutes. I felt a surge of adrenaline that I had never experienced before. I went into my kitchen and poured myself a cold glass of lemonade and sat by my front window hidden behind the curtains to watch the show. About 20 minutes later, a massive black tow truck with bright orange lights pulled onto our street. The driver was a large man with a thick beard who looked like he took his job very seriously. He hopped out of the truck and looked at the silver sedan, then looked at my driveway and shook his head in disbelief at how poorly the car was parked. He did not even need to knock on my door because I had already given all the information over the phone. He moved with the efficiency of a professional who had done this 1,000 times. He backed the truck up and lowered the hydraulic lift. He slid the metal arms under the front wheels of Chad's car and began to secure them with heavy-duty chains. The sound of the metal clinking was like music to my ears. I watched as he operated the controls, and the front of the silver sedan was lifted high into the air. The car looked even more pathetic and crusty from that angle. Just as the driver was finishing up and getting back into the cab of his truck, I saw a small white car pull up to the curb across the street. A young woman stepped out, and she was dressed very nicely in a floral dress and high heels. She looked at her phone and then looked at Chad's house. This was clearly the date. I decided it was time for me to make an appearance. I walked out onto my front porch with my glass of lemonade and sat down in my rocking chair. I looked as relaxed as a person could possibly be. The tow truck driver gave me a quick nod as he pulled away with Chad's car dangling behind him. The car was gone just like that. The street felt wider and the air felt clearer. About a minute after the tow truck disappeared around the corner, the girl in the floral dress walked up Chad's driveway. She looked a little confused because the driveway was empty and there was a clear space where a car should have been. She reached the front door and knocked. A few seconds later, Chad opened the door with a huge grin on his face, holding the bottle of wine. He stepped out onto the porch and said something I could not hear, but he looked very pleased with himself. Then he looked past her toward the street. His smile slowly began to fade. He looked to the left and then to the right. He looked at the spot where his car had been just moments before. He rubbed his eyes as if he thought he was hallucinating. He stepped off his porch and walked down to the edge of the sidewalk looking frantic. He started spinning in circles and looking behind other parked cars as if his sedan might be hiding somewhere. He looked like a lost puppy, but much less cute. The girl followed him down to the sidewalk looking more and more concerned. She asked him if something was wrong, and he started shouting that someone had stolen his car. He was waving his arms around and pointing at the empty space on the pavement. He looked completely unhinged. I cleared my throat loudly from my porch, and he snapped his head toward me. He looked like he wanted to scream at me, but he was also trying to stay cool in front of his date. He asked me if I had seen anything, and I took a long, slow sip of my lemonade before answering. I told him very calmly that if he was looking for his car, it had been towed by a professional service. I told him that I had warned him many times that blocking my driveway was illegal, and that I was finally done waiting for him to follow the rules. Chad's face turned a shade of red that I did not know was humanly possible. He started to argue with me and said that I had no right to do that and that I was ruining his life. He told the girl that I was a crazy neighbor who had been harassing him since he moved in. He was trying to play the victim, but it was not working. The girl looked at him and then looked at me and then looked at the driveway. She asked him if it was true that he had been blocking my driveway, and Chad tried to make another excuse, saying it was only for a little bit. The girl's expression shifted from concern to pure disgust. She told him that parking in front of someone's driveway was a total jerk move, and that she could not believe he was so inconsiderate. She said that if he was the kind of person who did not care about his neighbors, then he probably was not the kind of person she wanted to go on a date with. Chad tried to grab her arm to explain, but she stepped back and told him not to touch her. She said she was going to call an internet-based taxi service and go home. She walked away down the street without looking back once. Chad stood there on the sidewalk in his fancy shirt smelling like a perfume factory and looking at the empty street. He turned back to me and started yelling every curse word he knew, but I just smiled and told him that the impound lot was on the other side of the city and that they charged $300 for the initial tow plus $50 for every day the car stayed there. I also mentioned that they required cash or a money order and that they closed at 10 o'clock in the evening, so he better hurry if he wanted his car back tonight. He realized that he did not have a car to get to the impound lot, and he would have to pay for a ride just like I had to do so many times before. He stomped back into his house and slammed the door so hard that I thought the glass might break. I stayed on my porch for another hour, enjoying the peace and quiet of my neighborhood. For the first time in months, I felt like I was back in control of my own life. The next morning, I saw Chad walking down the street looking tired and disheveled, carrying a heavy bag. He must have spent the whole night dealing with the tow company. When he saw me, he immediately looked down at the ground and did not say a word. He parked his car in his own garage that day, and for the next week, he did not even come close to my driveway. But I was not done making sure he learned his lesson. I knew that bullies often wait for the heat to die down before they start their behavior again. I decided to install a high-definition security camera system that pointed directly at my driveway and the street in front of it. I also put up a small sign that said private parking and unauthorized vehicles will be towed at the owner's expense. I wanted him to know that I was always watching and that I would not hesitate to call the tow truck again. A few weeks later, I saw Chad outside talking to another neighbor, and he was complaining about how mean I was. The other neighbor, who had also been bothered by Chad's loud music and fast driving, just shrugged and said that it seemed like I was just standing up for myself. Chad realized that he did not have any allies on our street because he had not bothered to be a good neighbor to anyone. Slowly but surely, his behavior started to change. He stopped playing his music so loud, and he started actually waving when he saw people outside. I do not think he became a better person overnight, but he definitely became a more cautious person. He realized that in Springfield people value their property and their peace, and that there are consequences for being a jerk. I have not had my driveway blocked a single time since that night. Sometimes when I am driving home and I see that empty space at the bottom of my driveway, I feel a little spark of joy. It reminds me that I do not have to be a victim, and that sometimes a little bit of calculated revenge is exactly what is needed to restore balance to the world. I still see Chad occasionally, and he always looks a little bit afraid of me, which I do not mind at all. I have my sanctuary back, and my flower beds look better than ever. I even started a small neighborhood watch group to make sure that everyone on our street feels safe and respected. We had our first meeting last month, and almost everyone showed up except for Chad, of course. We talked about how much we love our community and how we want to keep it a place where people look out for one another. I think that is the real victory. Not just getting his car towed, but showing him that a community is built on mutual respect, and that if you break that bond, you will find yourself standing alone on the sidewalk while your date walks away. My life has returned to its normal productive routine, and I am no longer stressed about whether I can leave my house for a job. I have even taken on more projects because I have the mental energy to focus on my work again. The freelance world can be tough, but it is much easier when you do not have to fight your neighbor just to get to the office. I learned a lot from this experience about standing up for myself and not letting people walk all over me. I used to think that being a good person meant letting things slide and being patient, but I realized that being a good person also means protecting your own boundaries and not allowing others to mistreat you. If I had stayed quiet, Chad would still be blocking my driveway, and I would still be crying on my kitchen floor. Instead, I took action, and I changed the situation for the better. I am 34 years old, and I am proud of the woman I am and the home I have built. Springfield is a great place to live, and it is even better when your neighbors understand that your driveway is not their personal parking lot. I hope Chad eventually finds a way to be a better person, but even if he does not, he knows better than to mess with me. I keep my logbook in my desk drawer as a reminder of what happened, but I have not had to add a new entry in months. The pages are blank, and I intend to keep them that way. Every once in a while, I see a silver sedan that looks like his in a parking lot somewhere else, and I just have to laugh. I wonder if he ever told his next date about why his car got towed, or if he just made up some story about a crazy neighbor. It does not really matter to me what he says, because I know the truth, and so does the girl in the floral dress. Sometimes the best revenge is just making sure that the person who hurt you has to face the reality of their own actions. It is a simple lesson, but one that many people never learn. I am just glad that I was the one to teach it to him. My house is once again my sanctuary, and the only thing I have to worry about these days is which flowers to plant for the spring season. I think I will go with some bright yellow marigolds because they represent strength and light, and that is exactly how I feel these days. I have my peace back, and that is worth more than any amount of lemonade or ride-share fares. I have lived in Springfield for a long time, and I plan to stay here for a lot longer, and I know that I can handle whatever comes my way because I have shown myself that I have the courage to stand my ground. It is a good feeling to know that you can protect your own happiness. The street is quiet tonight, and the stars are out, and I am going to sleep well knowing that my driveway is clear and my world is exactly as it should be. The Crusty silver sedan is parked safely in its own space, and I am parked in mine, and that is the way it is going to stay. I have even started recommending Miller's heavy-duty towing and recovery to anyone else who has trouble with entitled people, because they really did a great job. They were fast and professional, and they helped me solve a problem that had been making my life miserable for far too long. If you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, just remember that you have options, and you do not have to just sit there and take it. You can be the hero of your own story, even if that means being the person who calls the tow truck. It might feel a little bit mean at first, but when you see the results, you will realize it was the right thing to do. My life is full of light and color and beautiful architecture, and I am not going to let anyone block my view of that. I am Evelyn, and I am a proud homeowner in Springfield, and I am someone who knows how to take care of business. The next time I see Chad, I might even give him a little wave just to let him know that there are no hard feelings as long as he stays on his side of the line. Life is too short to spend it being angry, but it is also too short to let people treat you like a doormat. I found the perfect balance, and I am going to enjoy every minute of it. The sun will come up tomorrow, and I will be able to drive right out of my driveway and go wherever I want to go, and that is a beautiful thing. I think I might even go out and buy a new lens for my camera to celebrate my victory. A wide-angle lens would be perfect for capturing the beauty of my neighborhood and showing how much space there actually is when people park where they are supposed to. It is all about perspective, and mine has never been clearer. I am happy and I am free, and I am exactly where I want to be in this world. Springfield is a city of opportunity, and I am going to make the most of every single one of them without anyone standing in my way. The end of this story is just the beginning of a much better chapter for me, and I cannot wait to see what happens next. No more notes, and no more warnings, and no more being the nice girl who finishes last. From now on, I am the woman who gets things done, and I think that is a much better way to live. I have learned that my voice matters and that I have the power to change my environment. It is an empowering feeling, and I hope that others who read my story feel inspired to stand up for themselves too. Do not let the chads of the world take away your peace of mind. Stand up and speak out, and if that does not work, call the tow truck. You will be glad you did. I know I am. Every single time I look at my clear driveway, I feel a sense of accomplishment. It is a small thing, but it represents a big change in my life. I am no longer a victim, and I am no longer afraid of confrontation when it is necessary. I have found my strength, and I am going to keep it. Springfield is my home, and I am going to keep it a beautiful and respectful place for everyone who lives here, including myself. The story of the crusty silver sedan is over, but the story of my happy and peaceful life is just getting started. I am going to go inside now and finish my lemonade and maybe look at some travel brochures for my next vacation. I think I deserve a little trip after everything I have been through. And the best part is that I know my car will be right where I left it when I get back. That is a wonderful feeling, and it is one that I worked hard to earn. I hope everyone finds that kind of peace in their own lives. It is truly priceless. I am going to close my curtains now and turn off the lights and enjoy the quiet of the night. Springfield is a good place, and I am a good neighbor, and everything is exactly as it should be. The world is full of people who think they can do whatever they want, but they eventually find out that the world does not work that way. Rules are there for a reason, and respect is the foundation of every community. I am glad I could remind Chad of that, and I am glad I could remind myself of my own worth. It has been a long journey, but I am finally home, and the driveway is clear. That is the most important part of all. I can breathe easy now, and that is exactly what I am going to do. Good night, Springfield, and good night to anyone who needed to hear this story. Stand your ground and do not let anyone block your path to happiness. You deserve to be heard, and you deserve to be respected. Never forget that. I know I never will again. The crusty silver sedan is gone, and I am still here, and that is the best ending I could have ever imagined. My life is my own again, and I am going to make the most of it, every single day, without fail. Because I am worth it, and my home is worth it, and my peace of mind is worth it. And that is the final word on the matter. I am going to go to sleep now with a smile on my face and a heart full of peace. The driveway is clear, and the world is good. And that is all I ever wanted. I am Evelyn, and I am finally free.